Tow it before the poor guy starts begging in front of the memorial guests. Tyler Brooks' voice cut through the glass front entrance of Hayes Motors as the tow chain snapped tight around Caleb Whitaker's faded blue-silver truck. Caleb did not move. His grease-stained hand stayed on Mia's shoulder while customers lifted phones and laughed. Mia opened the plastic sleeve holding the old title, pointed with one small finger, and whispered, "Daddy, why does the paper say Arthur Hayes?" 3 hours earlier, the truck still smelled like oil, cold metal, and the faint lemon soap Caleb had used to clean the cracked steering wheel before dawn. He stood in the driveway of his small rental house with the hood up, listening to the engine idle in the gray morning. Not loud, not proud, just steady, like something old had decided it was not finished living yet. Mia sat on the porch steps in her red knit hat, hugging her backpack to her chest even though it was Saturday. She had insisted on coming. Caleb had told her it would be boring, just a delivery to a dealership and a quick thank you to an old woman who wanted her husband's truck present for a memorial. Mia had answered the way children do when they already know the truth. You get quiet when something matters. Caleb had not known what to say to that. He only checked the envelope again. The title in its plastic sleeve, the service log folded behind it, and the silver key Eleanor had pressed into his palm with both hands. He put them in the inside pocket of his denim jacket, the one with a worn seam near the collar. "This is not ours," he reminded Mia. "We are just taking care of it for somebody who loved it first." By 9:15, Hayes Motors was already shining like a place built to keep fingerprints away. Tall windows reflected the morning sun. New SUVs sat under white lights without a speck of dust on their tires. Caleb eased the old truck into the front lane, careful with the clutch he had rebuilt himself, and parked near the service entrance where a sign said Memorial Event Parking. He had barely shut the door when Tyler crossed the showroom floor in a navy suit, smiling at 2 customers until his eyes landed on Caleb's boots. The smile stayed, but the warmth left. "Service deliveries go around back," Tyler said. Caleb nodded once. "I'm delivering this for Mrs. Eleanor Hayes." Tyler looked at the truck, then at Caleb's jacket, then at Mia stepping down carefully from the passenger side. "Sure you are." The words were soft enough to sound polite, sharp enough to cut. Caleb reached into his jacket for the title. "I have the paperwork." But Tyler had already raised 2 fingers toward the lot. A tow driver near the curb started walking over. Inside the showroom, people turned. Someone chuckled. Someone else whispered that the memorial should have had better security. Caleb felt Mia's fingers catch the side of his jacket. He covered her hand with his own, not to hide her, but to steady her. "Read the sign again, sir," Caleb said quietly. "Memorial Event Parking." Tyler's jaw tightened. "That sign is for invited guests." The tow hook dropped against the truck's front axle with a metallic clank that seemed too loud for such a polished place. Mia flinched. Caleb took 1 step forward, not fast, not angry, just enough to make the driver pause. "Before you move that truck," he said. "Read the title." Tyler laughed under his breath and looked over his shoulder at the showroom crowd. "Get it gone before the memorial crowd comes in." That was when Caleb noticed the small black dome camera above the entrance tilt away from him. Slowly, as if someone behind the glass had decided the truth did not need to be recorded. The camera above the showroom door turned away just as Caleb lifted the title, and for 1 small, cold second, he felt the whole building decide not to see him. The tow chain clicked again. Mia's fingers tightened around the plastic sleeve. Tyler Brooks kept smiling, the kind of showroom smile that showed teeth but no mercy. "Sir, step back. Read the paper first," Caleb said. "The vehicle is being handled." The words came from a woman in charcoal heels and a cream blazer, walking across the marble floor with a clipboard pressed to her ribs. Her name tag read Vanessa Pike, finance manager, and her perfume arrived before she did, sharp and expensive, cutting through the smell of Caleb's motor oil and the faint rubber scent rising from the truck's old tires. She did not look at the truck the way a mechanic would. She looked at it the way someone looks at a stain. Behind the glass, a few customers had drifted closer, coffee cups in hand. Watching like this was an unscheduled part of the memorial program. One young man raised his phone higher, whispering, "They're towing the poor guy's truck." Mia dipped her chin, and Caleb moved half a step sideways, placing his body between her face and the camera without touching the man, without making a scene. Vanessa glanced at Caleb's boots, then at his denim jacket, then at the old title in Mia's hands. "Mr. Whitaker," Caleb said. "Caleb Whitaker." "Mr. Whitaker," she replied, softening her voice the way people do when they want cruelty to sound like customer service. "This property has standards for display vehicles and guest parking. We cannot allow unverified vehicles to remain in a premium entrance lane, especially during a founder memorial." Caleb held out the plastic sleeve. "Then verify it." Tyler gave a low laugh. "Come on, man." Vanessa lifted one hand, palm out, not touching the paper. "I'm sure you believe you have documentation." "I don't believe it," Caleb said. "I brought it." That made Walt, the older security guard near the door, look up. He had been standing with his hand near his radio, gray mustache still, eyes trained on the space between Caleb and the tow driver. But when Mia shifted the sleeve, the old paper caught the light, and the name Arthur Hayes showed through the plastic like something buried under ice. Walt's face changed so quickly it was almost nothing. A blink, a breath held too long. Then Grant Keller arrived. He came from the center of the showroom, navy suit smooth, silver watch bright, expression calm enough to quiet everyone around him. "Let's not turn a misunderstanding into a spectacle," Grant said. He offered Caleb a sympathetic smile that never reached his eyes. "Mr. Whitaker, we respect working people here, truly. But today is not the day for confusion at the front door." Caleb looked past him at the tow driver still waiting with both hands on the lever. "Then tell him to stop until you read the title." Grant tilted his head, as if Caleb had asked for something unreasonable. "We'll review whatever you have after the vehicle is removed from the customer-facing area," Mia whispered. "But Daddy, they didn't even look." Vanessa's pen paused. Tyler heard it and smirked. "Sweetheart, grown-ups are handling this." Caleb's hand tightened once on Mia's shoulder, then relaxed. He crouched only long enough to pick up her red knit hat from where it had fallen near the tire. He dusted it with his sleeve, set it gently back on her head, and said, "You don't have to be embarrassed because your father works with his hands." The words were quiet, but the closest customers stopped whispering for half a second. Vanessa slid a form from her clipboard and placed it against the truck's hood, careful not to let her blazer touch the paint. "If you sign this voluntary removal acknowledgement, we can keep additional storage fees from accumulating." Caleb looked down. The paper smelled faintly of fresh toner. At the top, the timestamp read 8:42 a.m. He and Mia had not arrived until after 9. Beneath that, in small print, a line item read appearance risk surcharge, connected to something called Fresh Start Financing. Caleb did not sign. He lifted his eyes to Grant. "I won't put my name on a lie in front of my daughter." Grant's smile thinned. "Dignity sometimes means knowing when to leave." Caleb folded the old title back into Mia's hands. "No, sir. Dignity means not signing what isn't true." Walt's gaze dropped from Caleb's face to the timestamp on the form, then to the camera above the door, still pointed away from the truck. And for the first time that morning, the old guard looked less afraid of Caleb than of the building he worked for. Walt kept staring at the timestamp on Vanessa's form, but Caleb's eyes had already dropped to something smaller. The corner of the plastic sleeve in Mia's hands, bent from where the wind had caught it. He reached over, smoothed it with his thumb, and for one quiet second the noise of Hayes Motors faded into the memory of another place, 3 weeks earlier, where nobody was watching and nobody was clapping. It had been raining that afternoon, a thin Missouri rain that turned the gravel outside Caleb's garage dark and made the roof leak into a coffee can near the workbench. The air smelled of wet tires, old oil, and the peanut butter sandwich Mia had left half-wrapped beside her homework. Caleb was under a customer's sedan, tightening a loose bracket, when he heard the cough of an engine outside. One rough sputter, one tired knock, then silence. He rolled out on the creeper and saw an older woman standing beside a faded blue-silver truck with both hands on the hood, as if she were holding up a memory instead of a machine. She wore a plain brown coat, no jewelry except a thin wedding band, and her hair had come loose around her face in the rain. "Are you Mr. Whitaker?" she asked. "Caleb," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "This thing yours?" She looked at the truck before she answered. "It was my husband's. That was all. No last name with weight behind it. No mention of Hayes Motors. No hint of money, power, or ownership. Just a woman with rain on her sleeves and grief held so tightly it made her voice small." Caleb opened the hood. The hinges groaned. The engine bay was a museum of rust, cracked hoses, brittle wiring, and time. Any other shop would have written it off in 10 minutes. He knew that because a folded note sat on the seat with 3 estimates clipped together, each one stamped declined, not worth restoration, display value insufficient. The woman saw him reading and swallowed. "I don't need it pretty," she said. "I just wanted to hear it run once more before his memorial." Caleb glanced toward the little office where Mia's allergy medicine sat beside an overdue electric bill and a repair receipt he had not billed anyone for yet. Rain tapped the tin roof. The coffee can caught one drop, then another. He had every reason to say no, or at least to name a price that would save his own month. Instead, he reached into the cab, found the silver key on a worn ribbon, and turned it over in his palm. Which parts mattered to him? The woman blinked. "What?" Caleb nodded toward the truck. "If I'm going to touch it, I need to know what not to erase." That was when she cried. Not loudly, not theatrically, just one hand over her mouth, one hand on the fender, the way people cry when someone finally asks the right question. Over the next 3 weeks, Caleb worked after hours. He replaced the cracked fuel line, cleaned the carburetor, rebuilt the clutch linkage, and soldered wiring under a lamp that buzzed like tired bees. He paid for small parts himself and wrote each one down on a garage invoice he never planned to hand her. When Mia asked why he was fixing a truck for free, he said, "Because some things are worth more than what people can pay." She had nodded, then carefully taped a tiny paper label to a jar of loose bolts. "Important old truck." Caleb kept the dent on the left door because the woman had touched it and whispered that her husband used to lean there every morning before work. He slid the service log into a clean plastic sleeve when he noticed the faded line "First Delivery Route," and he tucked the old black and white photo behind it. A young man beside the same truck, smiling like the road belonged to everyone. He did not know the man's full story. He did not know the company. He only knew the woman's hands stopped shaking when the engine finally caught, deep and uneven at first, then steady. Back at Hayes Motors, Tyler saw Caleb smoothing the sleeve and mistook gentleness for surrender. "Finally ready to sign?" he said. Caleb did not answer him. He only looked at the bent corner of the title, the same sleeve he had protected from oil, rain, and time, and Walt saw it too. The old paper, the careful hands, the name Hayes shining faintly through the plastic, and the guard's face tightened as if he had just realized Caleb had not brought junk to the showroom. He had brought something somebody had loved enough to save. Tyler's question hung there, thin and pleased with itself, but Caleb did not reach for Vanessa's pen. The old title remained in Mia's hands, its plastic sleeve smoothed flat now, the name beneath it catching the white showroom light every time she breathed. Walt saw it. Caleb saw Walt see it. And Grant Keller, standing between them with his polished watch and patient smile, saw. Just enough to know the room was beginning to tilt. "Mr. Whitaker," Grant said, "we're not disputing that you brought a document." "Then check the VIN," Caleb replied. "That's what it's for." Vanessa's pen stopped above the voluntary removal form. For the first time, her expression changed. Not fear, not guilt, but inconvenience. She looked at Grant before she looked at the paper, and that small movement told Caleb more than her words had. Grant gave a careful little nod. "Vanessa, see what he has." She held out her hand. Caleb did not hand her the title. He turned the sleeve slightly toward the light instead, close enough for her to read, far enough that she could not walk away with it. "I can read it to you," he said, "one digit at a time." Behind the glass, the showroom hummed with soft jazz and espresso machines, the kind of music meant to make people forget how much money they were about to spend. Outside, The tow truck idled with a low diesel rattle. The chain stayed tight around the old truck's front axle. Mia pressed her red hat down over her ears, not because it was cold, but because grown-up voices had started to sound like doors closing. Caleb read the first 3 characters of the VIN. Vanessa typed them into her tablet with slow, hard taps. He read the next 3. She typed again. Then Grant stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to seem reasonable. This is not the appropriate process during a memorial event. You said you verify every vehicle, Caleb said. The screen inside says so. Grant's smile did not move, but his eyes flicked toward the digital wall behind the reception desk. There it was, looping over polished footage of smiling families and clean service bays. Every Hayes vehicle has a story. We verify every one. Vanessa cleared her throat. Legal would need to review historical ownership records. Caleb nodded once. Then call legal. Today, Tyler scoffed. For a rust bucket? Walt's hand tightened around his radio. Mia looked up at him and said very softly, "It was already hooked before she asked for the paper." It was the kind of sentence a child says because the order of things matters to children. Shoes before socks is wrong. Punishment before listening is wrong. A tow chain before reading the title was wrong too. Caleb did not smile, but his thumb brushed the edge of Mia's sleeve, thanking her without making her stand any taller than a 9-year-old should have to. Vanessa pulled the removal form closer to her clipboard, but Caleb had already seen the top line. The timestamp sat there in fresh black ink. 8:42 a.m. He looked toward the showroom clock. 9:23. He looked back at the form. Then he looked at Grant. We arrived after 9. The diesel engine outside seemed louder now. A woman near the coffee bar lowered her phone. Tyler said quickly, "Forms are pre-generated all the time." "With my name on it?" Caleb asked. That slowed the room. Not stopped it. Not yet. But it slowed it. Grant stepped half a foot to the left, and Caleb noticed he had placed himself between Walt and the security monitor near the front desk. On the monitor, for camera angles showed the lot, the customer lounge, the service doors, and the memorial display. None showed Caleb holding up the title. None showed Tyler raising 2 fingers to the tow driver. The entrance camera still pointed away, aimed uselessly at a row of spotless SUVs. Walt noticed too. His old eyes moved from the monitor to the black dome camera above the door, then to the folded title in Mia's hands. Without turning his body, he slipped his phone from his belt and typed with one thumb. Founder wall photo. Blue truck. Left door dent. Find it. Vanessa saw his hand move and snapped. Security. No outside communication during an incident. Walt put the phone away, face blank again, but the message had already gone. At that same moment, deep in Caleb's jacket pocket, his own phone buzzed once with Eleanor's name on the cracked screen. He could not answer it. Grant was watching too closely. The tow driver was still waiting, and the VIN, half-read and half-denied, now sat between them like a match someone had struck but not yet dropped. The match had been struck, but Grant Keller moved quickly to pinch out the flame. He stepped closer to Caleb with both hands open, the universal gesture of a man pretending to calm a situation he had created. "Mr. Whitaker, nobody is accusing you of anything yet." "Then stop treating me like I've already been found guilty," Caleb said. "Sir." Tyler's smile came back, sharper now. "You want proof? Start it." The tow driver looked from Tyler to Grant, unsure whether the chain should stay tight. Grant did not tell him to loosen it. That silence was permission. A small laugh passed through the customers near the coffee bar, but it did not spread as far this time. Something about the timestamp, the turned camera, and Walt's sudden stillness had made people more careful with their faces. Tyler pointed at the truck. "You say it belongs at a founder memorial. Fine, let's hear it run. Unless that old thing is just here for sympathy." Caleb looked down at Mia. Her red hat sat crooked from the wind, and her knuckles were white around the title sleeve. "Stand behind me, sweetheart," he said. "It might be loud for a second." "Is it going to break?" she whispered. Caleb shook his head. "No. Old engines just need patience." Vanessa shifted the clipboard against her chest. This is unnecessary. We should follow formal procedure. You had procedure at 8:42, Caleb said quietly, before I arrived. The sentence landed softly, but Vanessa stopped moving. Grant's eyes tightened. He leaned toward Tyler and murmured, "Keep this controlled." Caleb heard it. Walt heard it. The nearest customers heard only enough to lean in. Caleb stepped to the driver's door, careful not to yank against the tow chain. The truck smelled like vinyl warmed by sun, old dust, and the clean metal scent of parts recently brought back to life. He reached into his jacket and took out the silver key Eleanor had given him. The ribbon still frayed where her fingers had worried it for years. Tyler scoffed. "Nice prop." Caleb did not answer. He slid the key into the ignition. One turn. A tired click. Tyler's mouth opened. Ready. Caleb waited, listening to the fuel pump, the air, the small hesitation in the carburetor he had cleaned under a buzzing garage lamp. He touched the choke with 2 fingers, eased it half an inch and turned again. The engine coughed once, deep in its chest, then caught. The sound rolled across. The marble and glass, low and uneven for one breath, then steady, warm, alive. A chair stopped scraping inside the showroom. The espresso machine hissed and seemed suddenly too loud. Tyler's face lost its shine. Caleb shut the engine off almost immediately when he saw Mia flinch, then turned back to her. "You okay?" She nodded, but her eyes were wider now, less scared than amazed. From the front desk, Walt stared at the truck like a man hearing a voice from 20 years ago. Vanessa's tablet dimmed in her hand. Grant stepped forward too fast. "That proves only that it runs. It proves he didn't tow in junk," Walt said before he could stop himself. Grant turned on him. "Security will remain neutral." Tyler, flushed now, forced a laugh and said, "It wasn't supposed to run before the guests got here." The words fell out and stayed there. Not loud, not dramatic, just wrong. Caleb slowly looked at him. Walt slowly looked at Grant. And from the rear lot, beyond the service doors, an older woman in a plain brown coat stopped mid-step because she had heard the engine too, and the sound had pulled one name out of her like a prayer. Arthur. Caleb reached into the cab to remove the key, but as the sun visor dipped loose above the windshield, a small yellowed card slid down onto the seat. Mia saw it first. She picked it up with both hands, careful as if it might tear, and read the faded handwriting only as far as she could. "No customer is too small. No customer is too small," Mia read, then stopped because the last words had faded into a brown stain near the edge of the card. Caleb took it from her gently, not to silence her, but to keep the brittle paper from bending in her hands. The handwriting was old, slanted, careful. It matched the kind of man Eleanor had described without ever naming fully. A man who leaned on a dented door every morning and believed a handshake still meant something. Walt stepped closer, his shoes making almost no sound on the marble. "There's a picture upstairs," he said. Grant's head snapped toward him. "Walt." The guard did not look away this time. "Founder wall. North hallway." Vanessa closed her tablet with a flat click. "That area is restricted during the event. For employees," Walt said. "I am one." The small group moved not like people storming a building, but like people carrying something fragile through one. Caleb kept Mia beside him, away from Tyler's phone, away from the tow driver, away from every smiling face that had decided her father was less than them before knowing his name. The hallway upstairs was quieter. The carpet swallowed footsteps. The air smelled of furniture polish and old paper, not gasoline or coffee. Along the wall, framed photographs told the story Hayes Motors wanted people to remember. Ribbon cuttings, charity golf outings, glossy grand openings, men in suits shaking other men's hands. Then Walt stopped beneath a faded black and white photograph near the end. Arthur Hayes stood there as a young man, sleeves rolled to his elbows, one hand resting on the left door of a blue-silver truck. Same curve of the hood, same split in the grille, same small dent Caleb had refused to erase. Mia looked from the photo to Caleb, then back again. "Daddy," she whispered. That's the same boo-boo. Caleb swallowed. Yes, it is. He took the title from the plastic sleeve and held it under the hallway light. Walt pulled a dusty archive binder from a lower cabinet with hands that trembled less from age than from recognition. Page after page whispered against his thumb until he found a service record printed decades earlier. The VIN matched. Not almost. Not close. Matched. Caleb did not raise his voice. He did not turn and shame Tyler. He only laid the title, the service log, and the little stained card side by side on the narrow display table, letting them touch without covering one another. The 3 pieces of paper looked too small to bend a company, but the hallway seemed to lean toward them. Vanessa arrived a few seconds later, breath-tight, heels sharper now. These materials are not for public handling. She reached for the binder too quickly and knocked her own folder against the table. Papers slid out across the carpet. Caleb bent by instinct to gather them before Mia could step on them, then froze at the words printed across the top. Fresh Start Financing. Beneath it were customer names, loan numbers, and notes in narrow columns. Desperate. Easy close. Low appearance value. Push protection package. Caleb's face changed, not into anger exactly, but into something colder because Mia was standing close enough to read. He moved the folder behind his back and looked at Walt. Take her by the photo. Mia obeyed, confused but trusting. Why? She asked. Caleb's voice softened. Because some grown-up words don't deserve your eyes. Vanessa held out her hand. That folder is internal. So was the camera angle, Walt said. The hallway went still. Downstairs, through the glass railing, the memorial music began. Soft piano over hidden speakers. Eleanor Hayes had just entered the lobby in her plain brown coat, and from above Caleb could see her pause in front of the large video screen. It showed Arthur Hayes smiling beside a spotless showroom, but not the truck, not the dent, not the first delivery route, not the promise hidden behind a sun visor. Grant stepped away near the stairs and took a call, speaking low, but the open hallway carried every third word like a confession. If the widow sees the original pledge, the board vote is dead. Caleb closed his eyes once, then opened them. He could have walked downstairs and thrown every paper in Grant's face. He could have let the crowd do the rest. Instead, he slid the title, the service log, the stained card, and one copied page of Fresh Start Financing into Walt's empty security report folder. Not yet, he said. Truth needs to be strong enough to protect people after the room stops gasping. Walt looked toward the lobby, where Grant was taking the stage beneath Arthur's portrait. Then we don't handle this in a hallway, he said. Caleb looked down at the matching VIN one last time and understood the quiet had ended. The memorial hall had been built to make grief look expensive. White flowers lined the entrance of Hayes Motors' central showroom. Soft piano music poured from hidden speakers, and a 30-foot screen showed Arthur Hayes smiling in a navy suit beside polished vehicles Caleb knew he had never touched with his own hands. Grant Keller stood at the podium beneath the portrait, one hand over his heart, his voice warm enough to fool a room that wanted to be comforted. Arthur believed in respect, Grant said, in community, in humble beginnings. Caleb stood at the back with Mia beside him and Walt half a step ahead, the security report folder held flat against his chest. Caleb's denim jacket still carried the smell of motor oil. Mia still held the title in both hands, but now she kept it pressed neatly against her sweater the way he had asked. She was not there to fight adults. She was there to keep a promise straight. Eleanor Hayes sat in the front row in her plain brown coat, the silver keys twin held tightly in her palm, her eyes fixed on the screen. When Grant mentioned Arthur's first dealership, her mouth tightened. When the video skipped from a childhood photo to a grand opening ribbon, leaving out the truck, her fingers closed harder around the key. Grant noticed Caleb at the back and smiled with public sorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, we appear to have a small service disruption. A gentleman has brought an unauthorized vehicle onto the property, and while we are handling it with compassion, I ask that we not let confusion distract from Mr. Hayes' legacy. That was the first moment it looked like Grant might win again. A few heads turned toward Caleb. Tyler stepped near the side aisle, phone in hand, whispering to two employees. Vanessa stood by the finance desk with her clipboard hugged close, her face arranged into concern. Caleb did not step forward like a man seeking applause. He only raised his voice enough for the back rows to hear. "I'm not here to disrupt his legacy. I'm here because someone asked me to bring part of it back." Grant's smile froze, just at the corners. "Mr. Whitaker, this is neither the time nor the forum." Caleb looked at the portrait of Arthur. "Then why did you choose this room to bury it?" The words did not echo loudly, but they changed the air. Walt walked to the nearest side table and placed the first piece of evidence down. The old title in its plastic sleeve, Mia's small finger still resting carefully beside the name Arthur Hayes. He did not announce it. He just let the paper sit under the showroom light. Caleb placed the service log next to it, open to the faded line that read first delivery route. Then he set down the stained card from behind the sun visor, the one that began, "No customer is too small." Grant spread his hands gently, as if calming children. Old documents can be sentimental without being operationally relevant. Vanessa nodded too quickly. "And internal financing materials have been mischaracterized by an upset visitor." She said visitor like Caleb had wandered in from the street carrying trouble in his pockets. For one breath, the room leaned back toward Grant's version of the story. Then Walt opened the security report folder and removed the removal form Vanessa had tried to make Caleb sign. "This was printed at 8:42, he said. His voice was not loud, but 19 years of guarding the same building had taught people to listen when he finally spoke. "Mr. Whitaker arrived after 9. Grant's jaw shifted. "Pre-generated forms are common." "With his name?" Caleb asked. Silence pressed against the glass walls. Eleanor turned in her chair now, not toward Grant, but toward Caleb. Not with trust yet, with attention. That was different and more dangerous to a liar. Tyler moved close to Grant and muttered, "Get the truck out before she sees the VIN." Grant leaned toward him and hissed, "Not here." But the podium microphone was not the only one feeding the room. Grant's lapel mic, still live from the memorial livestream, carried the whisper through the speakers in a thin, unmistakable thread. The piano music seemed to vanish beneath it. A woman in the second row lowered her program. Vanessa's hand drifted toward the Fresh Start folder, but Walt's palm came down on it first. Caleb crouched beside Mia, his voice low. "You don't have to say anything else, sweetheart." Mia nodded, but she held the title straighter. At the front, Eleanor slowly stood, the silver key visible now between her fingers. Grant saw it and went pale beneath the showroom lights. Behind the service doors, the old blue-silver truck waited with its chain finally loosened, and Walt reached for the handle. Walt pulled the service door open, and the old blue-silver truck rolled into the memorial hall like a truth nobody had polished for display. Its tires whispered over the marble. Its engine idled low, uneven in the first breath, then steady, the same warm sound that had stopped Eleanor Hayes in the rear lot. Every face turned. The piano music still played through the speakers, but it suddenly sounded too delicate for the room. Caleb did not walk beside the truck like a man presenting evidence. He stayed with Mia near the side table, one hand close to her shoulder, the other resting flat against the title sleeve so the old paper would not slide. Eleanor stepped into the aisle slowly. The silver key trembled between her fingers. Grant opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. Vanessa's clipboard lowered an inch. Tyler's phone dipped toward his chest. The truck stopped beneath Arthur Hayes' portrait, directly in front of the screen that had tried to tell the company's story without it. For a moment, all anyone could hear was the soft ticking of the old engine cooling, the hum of the lights, and Mia's careful breathing beside her father. Eleanor reached the driver's side and placed her palm on the left door, right over the dent Caleb had refused to erase. Her shoulders broke, just slightly, as if that small hollow in the metal had recognized her hand. "Arthur leaned here every morning," she whispered. The microphone caught it. Not loudly, not theatrically, just enough. Caleb laid the title on the hood, then the service log opened to first delivery route, then the stained card from the sun visor. Walt brought the archive photograph from upstairs and set it beside them. Arthur as a young man, sleeves rolled up, smiling next to the same truck, the same split grill, the same dent under his hand. Mia looked up at Caleb. He nodded once, and she read only what a child could read, the part she had held safe since the tow chain first snapped tight. Arthur Hayes, she said. The name moved through the hall like a bell struck underwater. Eleanor turned toward the crowd. I am Eleanor Hayes, she said, her voice thin but unbroken. Arthur's wife, trustee of the Hayes Legacy Trust. And this was his first truck. Grant's hand went to his lapel mic as if he could still shut the room after the words had already entered it. Eleanor looked at him then, not with rage, but with a grief so disciplined it felt heavier. This truck didn't embarrass your company, she said. This truck built your company. Nobody clapped. Nobody coughed. Somewhere near the finance desk, a pen slipped from Vanessa's hand and clicked once on the floor. The sound was so small that it should have vanished, but in that silence it became enormous. Walt opened the security folder and placed the 842 removal form beside the title. Printed before he arrived, he said. Then he placed the Fresh Start financing pages down, the columns of desperate, easy close, low appearance value exposed under the same lights that had made the new cars shine. Vanessa reached for them by reflex, but stopped when she saw the livestream camera still pointed at the table. Eleanor did not touch the pages. She read them where they lay. Her face changed again, from personal grief to something public and final. Lock the finance office, she told the attorney seated in the front row. Preserve every contract under Fresh Start. No deletions. No calls to outside counsel before the audit team arrives. Grant tried to recover his voice. Eleanor, this is being taken out of context. The speakers answered him with his own earlier whisper, replayed from the live stream technician's console. Move the truck before she sees the VIN. He went still. The room went with him. Caleb removed his work gloves slowly and placed them beside the title, not as a challenge, but as a signature. I didn't bring it here to hurt anybody, he said. I brought it because I promised a widow her husband's truck would make it home. Mia leaned into his side and let out a breath she had been holding all morning. Eleanor looked from the gloves to Caleb's oil-stained hands, and for the first time, the room saw what she saw. Not a poor man asking for mercy, but a father who had protected a promise while others protected an image. The truth had finally been recognized. The power in the room had shifted, and yet Caleb's eyes stayed on his daughter, as if the only question that mattered now was what kind of man she would remember him choosing to be. The room did not empty all at once. It loosened slowly, like a hand releasing something it had held too tightly for years. Customers lowered their phones without being asked. Employees stepped away from the finance desk as Eleanor Hayes' attorney moved through the showroom with a legal pad, naming records, locking doors, asking Walt to stand by the security office until the footage could be copied. Grant Keller remained near the podium, his suit still perfect, his face not. No one dragged him out. No one shouted. That was not the kind of justice Eleanor allowed. She simply asked for his access badge, placed it in a sealed envelope and said, "You will not speak for Arthur's company while we find out who you taught it to ignore." Vanessa Pike handed over the Fresh Start financing files with fingers that trembled so slightly only Caleb noticed. Tyler stood near the service door, pale and smaller than he had looked when he first pointed at the truck. Mia stayed behind Caleb, no longer hiding, just tired. The old title was still on the hood, but it no longer looked like a piece of paper a poor man had to defend. Under the showroom lights, beside the service log, the stained card, and Caleb's worn work gloves, it looked like a witness that had finally been allowed to speak. Eleanor approached Caleb after the first wave of staff and attorneys moved away. She did not offer a speech. She did not reach for a checkbook. She stood in front of him as one grieving person standing before another, and her eyes moved from his oil-darkened hands to Mia's red hat. "You gave him back to me for one more morning," she said. Caleb looked toward the truck. "I just fixed what I could." "No," Eleanor said softly. "You protected what we forgot." That sentence did what applause could not have done. It reached Mia. Her shoulders lowered. Her hand slipped into Caleb's, warm and small and safe. By late afternoon, Hayes Motors had changed in ways that were not dramatic enough for the people who loved scandals, but were strong enough for the people who had been hurt. The Fresh Start program was suspended in writing. The hidden fees were frozen pending an independent audit. A formal notice would go to every customer affected, with refunds held through escrow and loan terms reviewed by outside counsel. Walt was given written protection from retaliation and asked to oversee the archive until a new ethics board could be formed. Tyler was not humiliated in front of the crowd. Eleanor gave him a harder mercy than that. If he wanted to keep his job under new management, he would call every customer he had mocked, apologize by name, and work Saturdays in the emergency repair fund Caleb had quietly proposed. Second chances, Eleanor told him, are not exits. They are responsibilities. When she offered Caleb payment, the number was more than he had made in months. He looked at it, then at the garage invoice folded in his pocket, the one with each part listed in his careful handwriting. Parts only, he said. Eleanor frowned, not insulted, just moved. Caleb, you earned more than that. He shook his head. Then put the rest where Arthur would have put it. Brakes, tires, batteries. Working families who miss one shift and lose everything. Eleanor studied him for a long moment, and this time she did not see a man refusing help out of pride. She saw a father teaching his daughter that goodness should keep moving after it is recognized. So the fund was named not after Caleb because he asked that it not be, but after the sentence on Arthur's card, no customer too small. A week later, the truck stood inside the showroom where the luxury SUVs used to face the entrance. It was not overpolished. Caleb had insisted the left door dent remain. Beside it, a small brass plaque read, Arthur Hayes' first truck, restored by Caleb Whitaker, who remembered what we forgot. Mia read it twice, then leaned against her father's side. Daddy, she asked, does respect sound quiet? Caleb looked across the room. A mechanic in clean coveralls was helping an elderly man fill out a repair request. Walt was showing a young employee the old service log. Eleanor stood near the truck with one hand on the dent, not crying now, just remembering. The showroom was quiet, but not empty. It was the silence of people understanding. Caleb squeezed Mia's hand and said, most of the time, sweetheart, but when it finally arrives, everybody feels it. Then he picked up his toolbox, the same scuffed box Tyler had mistaken for poverty, and walked back into the evening with his daughter beside him, leaving behind no victory speech, only the steady light of an old truck and the truth that dignity never needed to shout to become a miracle.